I think that the World Economic Forum, at the very least, plays the role of encouraging all of these policies. And it's why you're seeing throughout the Western world politicians acting in a way we've never seen before, which is in lockstep with one another. But I recognized also, Jasmine, that's a problem for them because that's suggesting there's more than rice and powdered milk on the other side of that wall. There's something worth spying on. By their own admission, I had violated nothing. And I had decided that I only had one option, a second option here, and that was they were either going to have to charge me with something or let me go.
I'm Jasmine Birtles, and today I'm speaking to Larry Taunton, who's an American commentator and columnist, and he works for all sorts of mostly American outlets such as CNN, The Atlantic, etc. And he's particularly looking at some big ideas at the moment. Hello, Larry.
How are you?
Good to speak to you, Larry. And I asked you to come along onto the podcast because I was very interested in a Twitter feed you had just recently. So can you explain what you're doing at this moment, what it is that you're tracking, and what's been happening to your work?
Sure, Jasmine. As you say, I deal in the realm of big ideas, and I have for several years now been attending the World Economic Forum kind of unofficially. And I sit and listen to what various politicians and CEOs of major corporations and others have to say, and the ideas that they want to make policy around the world. And many of them are quite alarming ideas. And I don't really make a habit of pushing back when I'm there because I'm just attending. I'm really kind of a party crasher. I don't pay any of the fees or anything. I just walk into every building like I own it. And it's given me opportunity to have some very interesting exchanges, but I feel like I get something different than what journalists get who are there, with their cameras and with their microphones, because I'm just sitting and having coffee and lunch and attending various meetings, and that brings me into contact with some interesting people. But then I go downstream from those ideas. So I'm dealing at the realm of the ideal level. And then I go downstream from that to see how those things, once they're made policy, what that looks like. And so to give an example, I was a couple of years ago on the Polish-Ukrainian border, and I was talking with Ukrainian refugees, war refugees pouring into Poland, about their experiences, about their plight. And then shortly thereafter, I was at the World Economic Forum, and I find myself in conversation with your former Prime Minister, Theresa May, who was talking about all the wonderful things they are doing for Ukrainian war refugees that are pouring into Poland. And I dare say I was the only person in that room who had actually been to Poland and spoken with any of these refugees, who said they were doing absolutely nothing for them. And the same has been true with, the World Economic Forum has really been pushing, and of course, many of the governments that adhere to sort of a WEF ideology have also been pushing open borders, which is devastating your own country, and has been hugely controversial in my own. And so I have spent for the past, 5 or 6 years, I've made about 12 to 15 trips to South America, cartel country, through Darien Gap, Central America, and straight up to Mexico City, where they board La Bestia freight train, the Beast, sometimes called the Train of Death, and take it 600 miles north to the U.S. border. And what you're discovering, in what I discovered in these journeys, is that USAID, United States Agency for International Development, was running what is basically a massive human trafficking op through a series of NGOs, most notably IOM, sometimes it's called OIM, the Organization for International Migration, or International Organization for Migration. So it's alternately both of those names. And while publicly the face of USAID has been that they're, basically, sort of giving out rice and grain and these kinds of things to people and trying to stem the tide of migration into my own country, the fact of the matter is that they were facilitating it. And it was a massive human tragedy because they really didn't care what was happening to these people from point A, their country of origin, to Z, the United States. And so I've been sounding the alarm on that for quite some time. And this past week was giving an interview on the subject that President Trump was watching. And he texted the host to say that this was information that was very valuable to them and that they were going to destroy, USAID. And anyway, from there, from the World Economic Forum, I made my way to Cairo. And I was in Cairo for this just a few days ago. I was in Cairo for other reasons. But while I was there, Jasmine, I thought, you know what, there's a USAID office here, and I think I'm just going to pop over. I'm an American citizen. I think I'll go over and see what they're doing.
Fair enough.
And so I did, and I went, just as I would at the World Economic Forum. As I point out to people, there was no ninja stuff here. I wasn't throwing grappling hooks over walls or climbing through ventilation shafts and rappelling down like Tom Cruise. I walked straight through past their security. Their security opened the barrier, let us drive in. I asked the security guard standing out front of the building if this was the entrance, and he indicated it was. And I entered into the building and I said, hey, I'm an American citizen and I've been tracking the activities of USAID, and I just wonder what you guys do here. And I wonder if you're complying with the President of the United States' very public order to cease all operations. Well, Jasmine, everything went sideways at that point, and I made a hasty retreat, got into the car and left. But about a week later, 3 days ago, I decided to go back just to confirm a couple of observations, but this time not entering the compound. And that's key to this discussion. I would just drive by the compound. And security, and these are security who they're not Cairo police. These are security, Egyptian security, who are employed by USAID. In other words, paid with my tax dollars. They come out from behind the barrier. They recognize me, and that's because I had put out a Twitter thread on my first experience that got roughly 12 million views. And so they come out from behind the barrier, stop the car, tell my driver to get out, and they tell me to get out, which I very politely told them I would not do. They demanded my passport and my phone. I told them they could have neither, but that I would hold my passport, I'm sitting on the passenger side. Here's the window. Guess if I'm in a British car, it's, like this. But anyway, I am holding my passport inside where they can see it, confirm my identity, even allow them to take a photograph of it. But I tell them, no, you can't have my passport and you cannot have my phone. And what ensued was a lengthy standoff, Jasmine, where they're trying to get the driver to drive first they tried to get me to get out of the car and enter the compound. And I told them I would not do that. And then they tried to get the driver to drive me into the compound. And I told the driver, you're doing no such thing. We're not moving. And so what ensued was a lengthy standoff where things began to escalate. They summoned Cairo police who came, and then they summoned the notorious Egyptian secret police who showed up, and again, demands for my passport and my phone. And for those who are, maybe never been through something like this, which I would guess is pretty well everybody who would see or listen to this, this is not my first rodeo. I've had these kind of encounters in other totalitarian countries. And your phone is your lifeline to the outside world. You surrender it, and you're done. And your passport is your ability to leave the country. You're as good as arrested. If they take your passport, you can't leave. So I said, no, I'm happy to show you who I am, but you can't have it. And the fact of the matter is, they knew who I was anyway, Jasmine. And so state security shows up, and the brutal state security that was formed, I think, by Nasser's government, but was trained by the KGB. And so this is Egypt's equivalent to the KGB. They have a habit of torturing people and killing people. And I thought, not a chance. I'm entering into the compound. And so there you have it. It was quite a standoff.
So, do you have any idea what was in the compound? What was so terrible that they couldn't let you see and would try even to, as you say, maybe torture and at least imprison you for looking at?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jasmine, because there was increasingly this feeling that they wanted to Kamal Khashoggi me. If you remember,
Yeah,
Khashoggi, who went
I do.
inside an embassy and was never seen
Wow.
ever again.
Mm.
And that actually was a comment made to me by someone who probably is known to you, one of my colleagues, Lawrence Fox.
Oh, yeah.
He said, Larry, you enter in there and you're Khashoggi. I mean, that's what's going to happen. And that I was aware that was a strong possibility. What I think is interesting here, Jasmine, is this was very stupid on their part, because
Yeah.
this has now been seen by the highest levels of our government, who have now watched this. And had I walked into that building, and my very straightforward questions, what do you guys do here? We help struggling third world countries. We help feed them and things like that. Well, are you guys complying with the President of the United States order to cease operations? It's a bummer, but yeah, we're in the process of a wind down here. There's no story.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no story. But instead, this was very intense. Somebody inside the compound was calling the shots and had the Egyptian state security on speed dial. Because again, bear in mind, this started with Egyptian USAID security.
Yeah.
They were on the phone calling their bosses inside the compound. And that's when the pressure began to get the car inside, get me inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it very clear. It was polite. I never raised my voice. I wasn't shouting. If you watch the videos, you'll see I'm very calm. I just politely said, not happening. I'm not leaving the car. I'm not entering into the compound. And no, you can't have my phone, and you can't have my passport.
Mm.
And throughout all of this, Jasmine, I was surreptitiously videoing as much as I could. And then I was firing it off to Lawrence. And I was to him because I thought, he wields a big enough stick on Twitter that if I disappear, if I go dark, he might be able to bring some guns to bear to call attention, to what had happened to me. If the Egyptians said, well, he fell in the Nile, it happens all the time, this kind of thing. So
But,
I was sending these videos.
so I'm just thinking, what about Doge? What about Trump himself? Have you been in touch with them to say, I've been here? Have you seen what's happened? Have you seen what's going on here?
I will say at this point that I have had conversations with the high-ranking members of our government, but I'll go no further than that at the moment. But
Okay.
the videos of what occurred there have alarmed people in, let's just say, in very, very high places, and who intend to do something about it. And it was so important that I got those videos, Jasmine, because otherwise it's just my word against theirs.
Exactly. Yeah, very important.
But you can see that one video where I'm holding my phone down and they're telling the driver to get out. And you see armed security there. And it's a bit of kerfuffle, that's taking place there. And I'm not going to leave the vehicle. I make it very clear. And Jasmine, my strategy here, I only had two cards to play. Neither an infallible protection for me, but they were all that I had. The first was mystery. They couldn't know for sure what I hadn't seen and what I hadn't communicated to other people. So if you try to disappear me, they can't know for sure that I haven't fired off videos, somewhere else. And they did see me on the phone and they were pointing. He's on the phone. He's on the phone. And so that was a source of concern for them. So there was mystery. The second is that I was trying to force the issue. I had decided that, look, I'd asked them, have I violated any laws here? No. Did I try to breach your security? Try to drive the car through? And no. So that by their own admission, I had violated nothing. And I had decided that I only had one option, a second option here, and that was they were either going to have to charge me with something or let me go. And the two things they were threatening to charge me with, I didn't think would look good for either one of them. The first was the suggestion that I was a terrorist. And I'm like, come on. How many American, Presbyterians, blow up buildings? This just isn't a very common thing that happens. And even one of the security guards, when I had said something to that effect, he kind of smirked and, turned away. There was kind of an acknowledgement by everybody present. This is ridiculous. Now, it would have given them the authority they wanted to do with me whatever they wanted. But long term, where are you going with that? Nobody's going to find that believable. The second charge, they quickly dropped that and moved to espionage. But I recognized also, Jasmine, that's a problem for them because that's suggesting there's more than rice and powdered milk on the other side of that wall. There's something worth spying on.
Yes, and did you get any sense of what it would be that was worth spying on? Because that's the sort of the Barbara Streisand moment, isn't it? As you've
Yes.
said,
Yeah, that's actually a very good comparison.
Yeah.
This was the Barbara Streisand effect. I can only speculate on that, Jasmine, but talking about this with other people who know more than I do, as it relates to things that are happening in the region. I'm boots on the ground. I'm a scout. I ride back and tell you what's over the next hill. So I'm very much in the weeds. There are other people who are seeing a much larger picture, and my guess is that this is related to Gaza. That you got to bear in mind. Think, for example, this is actually kind of funny. While I'm sitting in the car, firing off these videos, so I take the videos and then I'm sending them. And I put the phone under my thigh, to make it's going to be hard to take it. And I'm a pretty big guy. So I was protecting that phone and I'm praying, Lord, let these videos go. Send. Cellular signal in the third world isn't great, and videos anywhere, often take a while. And then I get on the phone and I call the U.S. Embassy. And I say, look, I've got a bit of a situation here. I'm being detained by Egyptian state security, the secret police, outside of USAID. And so the guy gives a very American, although I can't be sure he was an American, answer. He says, "Did they arrested you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Drive off." And my driver had already said to me that if we attempt to leave, they made it clear they will fire on the vehicle. This is the third world. And the point that I'm trying to make, and of course, you're increasingly becoming a police state, but in my country, if the police stop you, at some point, they either have to arrest you or let you go.
Yeah.
They can't just hold you on nothing. We're going to hold you because we want to hold you. I mean, unless you're a January 6er. So, so I was trying to force the issue to say, you're going to have to run with one of these ridiculous charges. And at some point, I even said to the guy, okay, I am a spy, but I'm spying on my government, not yours. And you could see that caused a little consternation with them, like, where do we go with that?
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then he said, do you have a permit to take pictures? You have an Egyptian government permit to take pictures, videos of Egyptian government buildings? And I said, no. And he looked like he thought he had me. And I said, but that's an American building.
Yeah.
And I said, and I pointed at security guards and I said, and my tax dollars pay their salary. And he said, well, that's beside the point. So they didn't have anything. I want to be clear here. It's not because they have respect for the rule of law. If I'd have been an Egyptian or a Nigerian or something, they'd have dragged me out of that car and, beaten me senseless, and you never hear from me anymore. But I had the thin but real protection that I was an American citizen. Now, if this had happened pre-January 6th, I don't think you and I are having this, if this had happened pre-January 20th, Trump's inauguration, I don't think you and I are having this conversation. But it's post-January 20th. And so what was happening here, Jasmine, is there are three governments that were at play here. There was the authentic U.S. government that I talked to with the young, inexperienced individual who said, yeah, drive off. Yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe I'll do that when I get back to Alabama, but not here with Egyptian state security, not here in the third world. Then there was the Egyptian government. And the third government at play is a shadow government. It's a deep state that the current residents of the deep state is USAID, and they were calling the shots inside the building. You see? So that's what was going on. And again, I think if Biden had been, or Kamala Harris had been president of the United States, they would have done with me whatever, because they would know that at the highest levels, they've got support.
Yeah.
But they were very aware that USAID was under massive, massive criticism. And I like to think that I have played a very significant role in that, because I have been, have uncovered the role of USAID in human trafficking.
That's extraordinary to hear. And I mean, you're mentioning human trafficking there. We started off with the World Economic Forum and open borders and how this is effectively leading to human trafficking. Do you see the World Economic Forum in this as well as USAID?
Well, I see at the very least, is Klaus Schwab, calling the shots? No, Klaus Schwab is the P.T. Barnum of this circus. I don't think Klaus Schwab wields that much influence, honestly. But what the World Economic Forum does do is it provides a place for tyrants and would-be tyrants to meet in a manner that doesn't involve all the protocol and official state visits. So you're a would-be tyrant, Prime Minister of Britain, and I'm, God forbid, tiny little, Macron. And, it all makes the news if the two, there's all kinds of protocol that is involved if we want to meet and have some kind of summit. But if you just happen to be in Davos at the same time I'm in Davos, it's very easy to arrange, me. So what Schwab has created is that opportunity for those kinds of informal contacts, you see, and for them to all kind of get on the same page. So I think that the World Economic Forum, at the very least, plays the role of encouraging all of these policies. And it's why you're seeing throughout the Western world politicians acting in a way we've never seen before, which is in lockstep with one another. And where you're seeing them, as we've never seen before, all of them, having no regard whatsoever for the voice of the people. So Keir Starmer, for instance, he's utterly ignoring what the British people themselves want. And see, they're all coached to do it this way. And that's because they all have a disdain for democracy and they intend to dismantle democracy. And it's why we've also seen, and again, Jasmine, I've spent a lot of time doing these things. We have seen in recent years in South America, Honduras, Peru, Chile, the most stable democracy in South America, Colombia, and Brazil all fall to Marxists in shady 2020 like presidential elections. In other words, what we're seeing in the United States is not different from what was happening there and what has been happening in Canada and what has been happening in Britain and in the United States. In all of these places, they're the same policies and it's the same strategies. The hiccup in this whole thing has been that Donald Trump, who they were sure was politically dead, somehow was politically resurrected, and now he is more than a fly in the ointment.
Yes, and it's happening in other countries. There's a possibility that the AfD will take over in Germany. Reform is doing phenomenally well in Britain. Obviously, we haven't got an election yet, but it's a movement that seems to be happening, and Doge seems to be potentially spawning shadow doges in other countries as well. Are you seeing this happening in the various countries that you're traveling in?
Yes, I mean, let's just take, for instance, Giorgia Meloni in Italy. She rode a populist wave into power, and yet I think the people who elected her have mostly been kind of disappointed with her. But I would defend her and say she had no leverage. Germany is up to its eyeballs to the European Union, German banks. She's had no leverage. But guess how she's becoming a little bit more boisterous, and that's because Trump's been elected. So suddenly now she is being buttressed by the United States. You see her and Elon Musk pretty chummy, with each other. And so there are massive changes, that are taking place. And I think you're going to see more Giorgia Meloni's popping up around the Western world. And let's just take, for instance, it's funny because I was discussing this with Lawrence Fox yesterday, and he's pretty down in the dumps, and I can understand because of everything that's happening in the UK, and sometimes to people he knows personally. And I said, brother, don't be so down in the dumps because we're winning. We are winning, and if you listen carefully to what J.D. Vance had to say at the Munich conference, he was making it pretty clear to Europe, we're going to storm your beaches again. And this time we're coming not just to Normandy, we're coming to Dover. And we are going to free the peoples of Europe once again from your tyranny. And one of the things I thought he said was quite shocking, or shocking maybe isn't the right word, jarring, but in a nice way. I thought, boy, I can't believe he said that. He was very vice presidential. He was very cordial, very, very polite. But he's somewhere in the speech, he said something to the effect of, we're not entirely sure you're our allies anymore. And you guys have kind of coasted on the assumption that no matter what, we've got your back. Well, if you guys are suppressing free speech, if you're not listening to the will of your own people, you're not our allies anymore. And we are against you.
And it's true, they are suppressing free speech, and there doesn't seem to be a move away from that. In fact, it seems, certainly from my perspective here in the UK, that as the US is opening things up and creating more transparency and trying to create a peace deal in Ukraine, in this country they're trying to do the opposite and trying to clamp down more and giving more money to the Ukraine fight. So what do you think? We'll begin to wrap things up, but what do you think that we in the UK and we in Europe should do to push for more transparency, more openness, more free speech? What can we do now that Trump is in the office, now that we've got the more transparency with Doge, etc.?
Well, Jasmine, you know your country better than I do. I was partially educated in your country and have loved it for a long time, though it's a country now that I barely recognize from my years there in the early 90s. But I'm there 2 or 3 times a year, and each time it feels, that the country I loved and has really slipped away. But I think in the broad outlines, Jasmine, what you do is what I did from the front seat of that sedan outside of USAID, and that is politely, quietly, but firmly resist. I will not comply. I'm not going to say that I'm okay with you chopping off the penises of little boys. That's Joseph Mengele type stuff. I'm not going along with that. I'm not going along with your sick sexual agenda. I'm not going along with the butchering of British citizens and with allowing people into this country who are of an alien worldview. Not going along with that. And I won't be suppressed. I will speak my mind. I won't endeavor to just be provocative for the sake of being provocative, but when it seems appropriate for me to voice my opinion, I'm going to do it. I think you have to. It's interesting because a few days ago I was doing major network in the United States, and one of the interviewers, who's very sympathetic with my point of view, he said to me, "You're a provocateur." And I got Jasmine. I got a little defensive because I was saying, well, no, I didn't go in there. I didn't shove anybody. I didn't pull a gun. I didn't start a fight. And he said, no, that's not quite what I mean. He says, what I mean is that you knew that just your mere presence in that place was going to get a reaction. And that part is true. That's absolutely true. I knew that either it was going to reveal that they're innocuous, they're really doing nothing, or they were going to react. And what you're describing about your own government, in a sense, Jasmine, I see as good news, because my extensive experience, be it for good or bad, my extensive experience with totalitarian regimes is that's a sign that they're deeply insecure that they are going to be able to hold on to power. A regime really that wants to stop you from sending out memes? Are you kidding me? That doesn't want you voicing your opinion, that doesn't want people to be able to that to me says they are afraid and they are in retreat. And so my feeling is right now they're cornered, which makes them more dangerous than ever, but we're winning and we're going to win.
That's great. Larry, I'm going to finish there because that's a good uplifting thought for us to go away with, that we are winning, but we have to keep persisting. This has been Larry Taunton speaking to me, Jasmine Birtles. Larry is a freelance commentator and a journalist, and he's following the big ideas at the moment. Larry, I hope we can speak to you again in a few months' time to find out more about what you're doing.
Well, that'd be great. And please tell your people to look me up. My podcast on YouTube, Ideas Have Consequences. Ideas Have Consequences. And you can find me at Larry Taunton on Twitter.
Fantastic. Larry, you've been great. Thank you so much. Do like, share, and tell all your friends about it because you know you want to. Thank you, and see you again.